Mark had always believed his marriage was built on trust. At 38, he carried the quiet pride of a man who thought he had done everything right. Steady job as an accountant, a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, and a family that looked complete in every photograph. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, but he was dependable, the kind of person others leaned on when they needed stability. His wife, Julia, was 34. She had a warmth about her that drew people in. Neighbors loved her, friends confided in her, and strangers often mistook her kindness for familiarity. She worked part-time at a local bookstore, which gave her afternoons free. Mark had always thought this balance was perfect, especially since they had a 6-year-old son, Ethan, who adored his mother and clung to her at every chance. The three of them looked, from the outside, like a picture-perfect family. Ethan's laughter filled the small house, Julia's energy brightened every dull evening, and Mark's quiet sense of order kept everything in line. They were far from wealthy, but they had what mattered: routine, security, and each other. For years, they had tried to give Ethan a sibling. It had been Julia's dream to have 2 children, and Mark shared it, though less desperately. They had faced disappointment after disappointment, each month ending with silent grief. There had even been a miscarriage 2 years earlier, a painful wound that Julia carried like a scar no one else could see. Through all of this, Mark held her hand, whispered reassurances, and told her that their family was perfect as it was. When Julia finally told him she was pregnant again, Mark felt a surge of joy he hadn't allowed himself to hope for anymore. She had told him one evening in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she handed him a small box with a positive test inside. He had lifted her into his arms, laughing, telling her that this was a miracle, that their family was finally growing. For weeks afterward, he walked with a lightness in his step. He told his parents, who cried with joy. He told Ethan, who shouted that he was going to be the best big brother in the world. Even Julia seemed radiant, her face glowing in a way he hadn't seen in years. Mark thought that this was their turning point, that all the struggles of the past were finally giving way to something beautiful. But the cracks began to show in the smallest of ways. Julia's phone, once left on tables and counters without thought, became an object she guarded carefully. Her smiles were sometimes distant, her laughter delayed, as though she were distracted by a world outside his view. Mark noticed her texting late at night, the faint glow of her screen illuminating her face, while she told him she couldn't sleep. First, he ignored it. He told himself that pregnancy was emotional, that Julia was simply caught between excitement and anxiety. He didn't want to be the kind of husband who doubted his wife, not after all they had endured together. But then came the night when her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. The screen lit up with a name Mark didn't recognize. The message preview was short, but the words seared themselves into his memory. "We need to talk. You can't hide this forever." Something inside him shifted. For the first time, doubt crept into the space where trust had always lived. He tried to brush it aside, but the unease rooted itself deeper every day. Julia swore she loved him. She looked him in the eye and called him her everything. But the phone, the secretive messages, the guarded smiles, they all whispered another story. Mark didn't know it yet, but the truth was waiting for him, heavy and sharp, hidden in plain sight. And once he uncovered it, the foundation of his life, the love he thought unshakable, would never be the same. Mark sat at the kitchen table one evening, staring at the unopened bills in front of him. His mind wasn't on numbers or due dates. It was on Julia. Upstairs, her voice muffled as she spoke into her phone. She had said that it was Claire, her friend from the bookstore, but her tone wasn't casual. It was soft, hushed, urgent. When she came down, she smiled faintly and asked if he wanted tea. He said that he did, but his voice carried an edge. She noticed it immediately, tilting her head slightly as if to measure his mood. He said that she had been on the phone a lot lately. She said that she had just been catching up with friends. He said that he never heard her laugh during those calls, only whisper. She said that she didn't want to wake Ethan, that's why she spoke quietly. Her answers were smooth, but her eyes flickered. Mark felt the sting of doubt again. The next day, he tried to push it aside. When Julia brought Ethan home from school, Mark greeted them warmly. He lifted Ethan into his arms, asked about his day, and listened as the boy recounted playground adventures. Julia smiled at the scene, but Mark noticed her checking her phone even as she stirred the pot on the stove. That night, while she was folding laundry, Mark sat on the edge of the bed. He said that he had something on his mind. She asked what it was, her tone careful. He said that he had seen a message on her phone the other night. She froze, a shirt half folded in her hands. He said that it had been from someone he didn't know, and it said, "We need to talk. You can't hide this forever." Her face paled, but she quickly forced a smile. She said that it was nothing, just a misunderstanding, a friend who was going through a hard time. Mark looked at her steadily. He said that he had been married to her for over a decade, and he knew when she was hiding something. He said that he needed the truth, not excuses. Julia's eyes filled with tears. She dropped the shirt and sat beside him. She said that she loved him, that she loved their family, that she would never do anything to destroy it. He wanted to believe her, but the words felt rehearsed, as if she had said them to herself many times before. He asked who the man was. She flinched. She said that there was no man. He pressed again, his voice rising slightly. He said that her messages told a different story. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands, repeating that she loved him, that she would explain everything when the time was right. But Mark wasn't satisfied. He said that if there was nothing to hide, then why wait? Why not explain now? She shook her head violently. She said that some things were complicated, that he had to trust her, that revealing everything too soon would only hurt them more. His frustration boiled over. He said that secrets were poison in a marriage, that lies corroded everything they had built. He said that he had stood by her through everything, and now she was closing him out when he needed her honesty the most. She reached for his hand, her eyes pleading. She said that he was her world, that she swore she loved him, that he had to believe that even if he didn't understand everything yet. Mark stared at her, his chest heavy. He wanted to believe her, but the memory of that message gnawed at him like a thorn. The silence stretched between them, broken only by her quiet sobs. Finally, she whispered that when the time came, he would understand. She begged him not to push, not to ruin what they still had. He said that he didn't know how much longer he could wait. That night, Mark lay awake again, watching the ceiling, listening to Julia breathe beside him. He replayed her words over and over, searching for truth in them, but all he found was doubt. The days turned into weeks, and life moved on as if nothing had changed. But Mark felt everything had. The routines that once brought comfort now felt like carefully rehearsed performances. Breakfast at the table, school drop-offs, Julia heading to the bookstore, Ethan chattering endlessly about superheroes. All of it looked normal from the outside. Yet beneath it, silence and suspicion buzzed like a wasp waiting to sting. Mark began noticing small things he had overlooked before. Julia's phone never left her side now. She carried it even to the bathroom. She no longer asked Mark to stop by the bookstore after work, saying that she preferred to keep her work life and home life separate. When she laughed at something on her phone, the laughter was too quick, cut short, as if she caught herself enjoying it too much. Ethan, with his innocent eyes, began picking up on the tension. One morning, as Mark poured cereal, Ethan asked why Mommy was sad all the time. Mark froze, the spoon trembling in his hand. He forced a smile and said that Mommy was just tired because of the baby. Ethan nodded but didn't seem convinced. At work, Mark found himself drifting away from spreadsheets and calculations. He replayed Julia's words from their late-night confrontation. "Some things are complicated. I love you, I swear I love you." They rattled around in his head, making concentration impossible. His coworkers noticed his distraction, though no one asked directly. Outside the family, the neighborhood buzzed with its own kind of curiosity. Their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stopped Julia one afternoon and said that she was glowing. That pregnancy suited her. Julia smiled politely, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, but Mark, watching from the porch, saw the shadow flicker across her face. Another time, when Mark ran into Mr. Harris at the corner store, The man clapped him on the shoulder and said that he must be proud, expecting another child. Mark nodded, but the pride that should have surged in him was missing. Instead, doubt gnawed at him. He wondered if he was even meant to be proud. At home, the tension grew sharper. Mark caught Julia smiling at her phone late at night. When he asked who it was, she said Claire again. He said that Claire must be the busiest friend in the world to text so much. She stiffened but didn't answer. One Saturday, Julia said she was going to the bookstore for a staff meeting. She left in a hurry, avoiding his eyes. Mark waited 20 minutes, then bundled Ethan into the car under the excuse of buying groceries. On the way, he drove past the bookstore. The windows were dark. No cars were in the lot. He felt his stomach twist, but he didn't confront her that night. He didn't want to accuse her without proof. Still, the suspicion clung to him, growing heavier by the day. Even small joys were tainted. When Julia put Ethan to bed, reading to him in her soft voice, Mark watched from the doorway. It should have been a perfect picture of family life. Yet all he could think was that the woman he loved was hiding something that could tear their family apart. At dinner one evening, Ethan asked when the baby would come. Julia smiled and said that it would be a spring baby, just like him. Ethan clapped his hands excitedly. Mark forced a smile, but inside, a darker thought grew. Spring felt too far away. By then, the truth would either shatter them or consume him slowly. Sarah, Mark's sister, visited one Sunday and noticed the tension almost immediately. As they sat in the living room, she asked how things were. Mark said that everything was fine, but his voice lacked conviction. Julia chimed in quickly, changing the subject to Ethan's schoolwork. Sarah's sharp eyes lingered on Mark, silently telling him she didn't believe him. The secret was seeping into everything. Their meals, their conversations, their friendships. Every routine moment became a stage for suspicion. Julia seemed more guarded, Mark more distant. Ethan sensed what he couldn't understand, and the neighbors whispered without knowing. Life moved forward, but beneath the surface, cracks widened. Mark knew it was only a matter of time before some message, some slip, would expose the truth he feared most. Mark's doubts had grown so heavy that he finally decided to confide in someone. One evening, after Julia went upstairs early, he sat in the dimly lit kitchen with his sister Sarah. She had stopped by to drop off a bag of hand-me-down clothes for Ethan, but when she saw Mark's face, she stayed. He poured 2 cups of coffee, even though it was late. She asked what was wrong. He hesitated, then said that something about Julia didn't feel right. He said that she had been guarding her phone, sneaking out, lying about work meetings. He said that he had read a message, just one. That sounded like it was from someone she shouldn't be talking to. Sarah frowned deeply. She said that he had to be careful, that stress and hormones could make Julia act differently. She said that maybe Julia was talking to a doctor or a friend about pregnancy complications. She said that he might be misreading the situation because of his own fears. Mark wanted to believe her, but the memory of Julia's tears and evasions wouldn't let him. He said that Julia swore she loved him, but she wouldn't tell him the truth. Sarah told him that if Julia swore love, then maybe it was true. Maybe she was hiding something painful, not something shameful. Meanwhile, Julia had her own confidant, her mother. One afternoon, Mark came home early and overheard Julia speaking softly on the phone. She said that she couldn't carry this secret much longer, that Mark was starting to ask questions. She said that she was terrified of losing everything if the truth came out. Mark froze in the hallway, his blood pounding in his ears. He wanted to burst in, to demand she explain, but he held back, straining to catch more. Julia's mother's muffled voice replied, but the words were indistinct. Julia said that she couldn't risk hurting him now, not when the baby was already part of their future. She said that she would find the right time to confess. Mark stumbled back, his mind racing. To him, it sounded like proof. Proof that she was hiding another man's child. Proof that his marriage was built on lies. But Julia's version of events, which she kept locked tightly within her, was different. She wasn't cheating. Her secret was tangled in the past, a past she was too ashamed to confront. The truth had nothing to do with a lover and everything to do with choices she had made before Ethan was even born. Choices she had buried so deeply that even she wanted to believe they never happened. Her mother thought that Julia should tell Mark before the baby arrived. She thought that he deserved honesty, even if it risked breaking them. But Julia clung to silence, telling herself that protecting Mark from the truth was an act of love, not betrayal. Mark, however, pieced together his own version. He told himself that Julia had fallen in love with someone else, that the late-night messages were to a man who claimed the child was his. He convinced himself that every smile she gave him was forced, that every touch was a mask. The false tracks deepened the divide. Sarah's reassurance that it might be medical, Julia's mother urging her to confess, Mark's growing certainty of betrayal, all of them chasing shadows, none of them touching the real truth. One evening, Mark confronted Julia again. He said that he knew she was hiding something, that she was talking to her mother about it. He said that if she loved him, she should tell him the truth now. Julia's eyes filled with fear. She said that he had to trust her a little longer. She said that it wasn't what he thought, but she couldn't explain yet. She said that she loved him more than anything, and that should be enough. Mark slammed his fist on the table, saying that love without honesty was nothing but a lie. Julia broke down, sobbing, repeating that she would tell him when she found the courage. In that moment, both of them believed they were right. Mark believed she was hiding a lover. Julia believed she was protecting him from an old sin. Their truths collided, creating a storm of suspicion that neither could control. The false tracks had led them far from each other, and the collapse was only beginning. The breaking point came on a stormy Friday night. Rain hammered against the windows, and the air in the house was thick with tension. Mark had spent the entire week simmering, barely speaking to Julia except in clipped exchanges about Ethan or bills. Julia, in turn, tiptoed around him, her eyes red from crying in private. That night, as Ethan slept upstairs, Mark finally confronted her head-on. He said that he couldn't live like this anymore, drowning in secrets. He said that he knew she was hiding something about the baby, and he demanded to know who the father was. Julia gasped as though he had struck her. She said that the baby was his, that she had never been with another man. She said that she loved him, and that he had to stop accusing her of betrayal. But Mark wasn't listening. The doubt had taken root too deeply. He said that she had been sneaking out, lying about work, whispering on the phone. He said that no faithful wife did that. Julia fell to her knees in front of him, clutching his hands. She said that he had to believe her, that she couldn't explain everything yet, but the baby was theirs. Tears streamed down her face as she begged him not to give up on them. Mark pulled his hands away. He said that he couldn't stay in a house full of lies. He said that until she told him the whole truth, he was leaving. The slam of the front door echoed through the house. Julia crumpled to the floor, sobbing, her hands on her stomach as though to shield the child inside her. Upstairs, Ethan stirred, sensing the storm below, but did not wake. For 3 days, Mark stayed with his friend Tom, a coworker who lived across town. He told Tom that Julia was cheating, that the baby wasn't his. Tom frowned but didn't argue. He had heard enough stories to know that men often saw what they wanted to see. Still, he advised Mark to be careful, to get proof before making decisions he couldn't undo. Mark didn't need convincing. He was determined to find proof. The following week, Mark drove by the bookstore on his lunch break. He saw Julia outside, speaking to a man. The stranger was tall, broad-shouldered, and leaned in too close. Julia looked nervous, her hands fluttering as she spoke. When she noticed Mark's car at the corner, her eyes widened with panic. Mark's chest burned. He drove off before she could approach, his vision blurred with fury. That night, he sent her a message saying that he knew everything, that he had seen her with him. Julia replied with desperate words. "It's not what you think. Please let me explain. Please." But Mark ignored her. 2 days later, he saw the man again, this time at the grocery store, standing by the produce section. Mark's heart pounded as he walked up to him. He said that he knew who he was, and he should stay away from his wife. The man looked genuinely confused. He said that he didn't know what Mark was talking about. Mark shoved him, his voice low and venomous. He said that if he came near Julia again, there would be consequences. The man pushed back, saying that he had no interest in Julia. He said that he worked with her mother on a community project, and that Julia had only spoken to him about fundraising. Mark's mind spun. Was this another lie, or had he misread everything? Julia's mother called him that night, furious. She said that he had humiliated an innocent man. She said that Julia was breaking under the weight of his accusations. She begged him to come home, to stop tearing the family apart. Mark sat in silence, his head pounding. If the man wasn't her lover, then what was Julia hiding? Why the secrecy, the tears, the late-night messages? His thoughts grew darker. Maybe it wasn't about a lover. Maybe Julia was hiding a medical condition, or something about the baby's health. But then, why would she cry to her mother that she was terrified of losing him? Why would the man at the bookstore lean in so close? The questions consumed him. His heart still whispered that Julia's love was true, but his mind screamed betrayal. By the end of the week, Mark returned home, but the house felt colder than ever. Julia's eyes followed him with a mixture of hope and dread. She asked if he was ready to talk. He said that he wasn't sure. The storm hadn't passed. It was only gathering force. And somewhere between her sobs and his suspicion, the truth remained buried, waiting to be unearthed. The night Mark returned home, the air was thick with the kind of silence that weighed more than words. Julia had made dinner. Roast chicken, potatoes, Ethan's favorite, but nobody touched their plates much. Ethan chattered about school projects, filling the gaps with his innocent voice, but the adults only nodded absently, their thoughts elsewhere. After Ethan went to bed, the house grew too quiet again. Julia stood at the sink, rinsing dishes, her shoulders hunched. Mark sat at the table, staring at his hands. The gulf between them was wide, yet each one waited for the other to speak first. Finally, Julia broke the silence. She said that she couldn't go on like this, living under suspicion. She said that he had to either trust her or let her go. Her voice shook, but her eyes held steady. Mark leaned back in his chair, exhausted. He said that he wanted to trust her, but she had given him nothing but silence and half-answers. He said that trust without truth was impossible. Julia dried her hands, walked over, and sat across from him. She said that the baby was his, that she had never betrayed him with another man. She said that she was hiding something, yes, but it wasn't what he thought. She said that it was something from her past, something that had come back, something she hadn't found the courage to tell him yet. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. He asked what it was. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she whispered that she wasn't ready, that she needed him to be patient just a little longer. Mark's fists clenched. He said that patience was running out, that his love had limits, that one day soon he would walk out for good if she didn't tell him. Julia reached for his hand. She said that she loved him more than life itself, and that should mean something, even in the absence of clarity. Her touch was warm, desperate. He let her hold his hand, but his eyes turned away. The following week, a letter arrived in the mail, addressed to Julia in handwriting Mark didn't recognize. He placed it on the counter, his chest tight, waiting for her to open it. She froze when she saw it, her face draining of color. She snatched it up quickly, tucking it into her pocket. Mark asked who it was from. She said it was nothing, just paperwork. He said that paperwork didn't make a woman look like she had seen a ghost. She said that he needed to let it go. That night, Mark lay awake again, staring into the darkness. The words, "We need to talk. You can't hide this forever," still haunted him, looping endlessly in his mind. Julia slept beside him, her breathing uneven, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. The truth hovered between them, unseen but palpable, pressing on the walls of the house. Was the baby his? Was Julia telling the truth? Or was there another man, another life, hidden just beyond his reach? Morning would come, and the questions would remain unanswered. The family still looked whole from the outside, but inside, every smile, Every touch, every word was shadowed by doubt. The envelope lay hidden in Julia's dresser. The secret lived inside her heart. And Mark's faith, once unshakable, now teetered on the edge of collapse. The story did not end. It only paused in that fragile silence, where love and suspicion coexisted, each waiting to win.